guys, we are here for another episode, another season of Justice Speaks. And today we have Karissa, the world traveler. We are so excited. She's always on our page, pumping us up on Instagram. I always see her post. We see her post about traveling. So I was like, can we talk to this girl and see what she's all about? So, of course, she obliged us, and we're so happy to have her. Thank you, Karissa. How are you doing today?
It is my honor to be here with you, Leah. Thank you so much. I am just overjoyed and purely delighted to be with you all. Like, this is an honor. When I found out about the page, I know my sister Kanisha is already connected to you all through our gathering place. But when I saw the Instagram, I don't know, I just like exploded with joy. I'm like, this is amazing. And to have people from different backgrounds teaching on different languages, it's such quick information to absorb and apply. And I really treasure you all. So thank you so much for this platform, this opportunity to share.
Awesome. This is kind of like the first immediate feedback we have about the word of the week on film. So it's so glad it was something that I just tried on a whim. I was like, it'd be kind of cool if we did something that just was fun for our audience that follows us on Instagram. So I was like, yes. I just started asking like people from my past, like, hey, will you do a couple words? And then now it's like continuing. So it's been great. Thank you so much for loving it and participating.
Absolutely. Especially where there was a guy who was teaching on, I think, Spanish slang.
From Mexico.
Yes, he was from Mexico.
Yeah.
And I was just fascinated by that because you don't really get to be immersed in a culture unless you really know like the humor, the slang. Like that's when you're proficient, I believe. Not just knowing vocabulary, but you understand the humor, you understand slang, and you can apply that and retain it. That's when you've arrived. So to get that is like to get the post-grad course. So thank you. Thank you.
Maybe like a quick little cheat sheet to the culture.
Yeah. And to hear different accents, like the authentic accents of native speakers of the different languages, that's really rich. So thank you.
Nice. Well, Chris, I'm gonna jump into our questions here, and take it as fast or slow as we'd like. What the first question is: how do you identify?
I identify as a Black woman who is a Christian.
Nice. Awesome. So on your Instagram, I saw that you did a lot of traveling, and one thing you love to talk about is that before the age of 30, you've been to 7 continents. So I wanted to ask you, what was your experience as a Black woman traveling? Did you face any assumptions? Did you learn any languages? I lived abroad in Argentina, and I was pretty good in Spanish, and they would always ask me, vos sos brasileira? Like, are you from Brazil? Are you from here? Are you from the Dominican? Are you from Puerto Rico? And I'm like, nope, I'm from the US. And they wouldn't believe me. They look at me like, what? Or when I was on the bus, there's this phrase in Argentina that says, no hay negros en Argentina. And that means there are not any Black people in Argentina. And they would be looking at me on the bus like I was a ghost. And I was just like, okay, I'm just here. So did you experience any like weird stuff like that where people were just like, what are you doing here, Black woman? Or were you embraced? Or how was it for you?
My gosh, my jaw is dropping because you reminded me of when I was in Argentina. Before I went to Antarctica, in order to get to Antarctica for my particular route, I left from Ushuaia, Argentina, which is the southernmost city in the world. And while I was there and I was meeting people from different countries in South America, many of them thought that I was from Brazil. And so that was something that was common. So I'm like, oh my goodness, they thought you were from, I could see that, and that's the there's so much diversity within that particular continent, within South America. So, you could be from here, you could be from Suriname, there's so much, diversity within the continent. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Speaking of the continent, which is referred to in many cultures, they're referring to Africa. So when I was traveling abroad, I would travel to, throughout Southeast Asia. I traveled to Thailand, Laos, Malaysia, Singapore, dropped down to Australia. Specifically, though, when I lived in Asia, I lived in China, many people, and even also when I lived in Saudi Arabia, people would automatically assume that I was from an African country, like directly from there, you know, down the bloodline, of course.
Right.
But when I traveled even throughout Europe, sometimes, depending on where I was, they would think that I was from an African country. And so understanding how Americans are treated, I'm from La Vista, Nebraska, de los Estados Unidos in La Vista, Nebraska. I'm from here, born in North Dakota. I'm a military brat. I also identify as a military brat. My dad was in the Air Force. But being from here in the US and observing how people are treated based off of their American background, that blue passport, I've watched and seen how certain people are treated according to their American passport. So, to be honest, sometimes I would take on an accent depending on the discount that I wanted in a certain place. And I know that, you know, there may be certain sounds or accents that may make someone think that you're from a certain country. So oftentimes I would play on to that. I had, because I got better discounts being from an African country. I mean, why, you know, that's just the fact. I did have a roommate from South Africa. She was a black South African. And when I was living in China, so I got to learn some of her accent. I'm not going for it on here today because no, it's not. But I definitely, you know, played into that for a reason that was rather selfish, to get a discount.
I totally understand that though, because it's like when you're from the US and like other countries, sometimes it's like better to pretend that you're not. And I was so happy that I spoke Spanish, because then people like wouldn't assume, because you're right, they do treat you differently if you're from the US. So I don't blame you. And when I went to Argentina, I didn't tell a lot of people this, but I was like, if I act like I was from London, like they would know.
I'm telling you, I use accents a lot. And sometimes I spoke in Spanish as well. I would use, you gotta do what you gotta do on the road. You know what I'm saying? I mean, maybe I didn't have to do it, but it benefited me. It benefited me. I haggled in different languages, you know, and even when I was when I lived in China, they had like night markets, street markets. The night market is what it was called. And so I was intentional, and I tried to be intentional, especially when I was living or traveling in certain places, to have enough respect to learn certain phrases and also numbers, so that when I did go to make purchases, I had the capacity to negotiate in their language, which increases their level of respect for you. And it also increases your level of respect for yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to do the work and increase my intellectual capacity and increase my knowledge by respecting this culture to learn and apply. And I think that also puts you in a better position, safety wise. I mean, do you understand what fire means? Do you understand what up and down means, or toilet and this? It just equips you. That's part of, I think, the luggage that you should carry is the language. That's good. The luggage. I've never said that before. See what World Speaks does? The luggage that you should always carry is the language.
Yeah, I love that, actually. We're gonna have to quote you on that. We're gonna like have a post, because that was good. I love that. And I totally agree with you. If you're going for vacation, whatever, just to have a couple in your back pocket. I'm also good at accents. So sometimes people think I do speak the language, but I gotta be like, I just know a little bit, you know. But I do think so, like just having those like maybe key 20 phrases that you can keep working, so that you can really engage with people. Because even though you may not be fluent, people will have this level of respect for you. Like, okay, you're trying to come over here and
Yeah.
be a part of my culture. And speaking
Yes.
of culture, as a Black woman, what is one thing you think people get wrong about our culture as Black women?
That there's one tone.
I agree with that.
That there's one flavor.
I agree.
That there's one texture. That there's one universal, sphere, that we are to fit inside. Like, it's just, this is exactly what you are. You're all part of, which is so not true.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain things that we as a Black people can identify with.
Yes.
However, what is it they say? What, monolithic? We're not monolithic, not one, just on one page, one type. There's so much diversity within us as a Black people. And I think that whole, mentality of all Black people are the same, or they all sound the same, or they all eat the same, or they all behave the same. It's unfortunate because it just speaks to ignorance, not only ignorance, but the comfort of being ignorant. Because at this point in 2021, we have no business being comfortable with saying, I didn't know that. And sincerely, and I'm talking about something even as saying colored in 2021 and saying, I didn't know that.
Right.
At a certain point in your life, those words should no longer come from your voice. There should be a knowing and understanding and awakening as it pertains to various cultures and human existence. Yeah. Period. And there's that desire to learn that should constantly be stirred up inside of all of us, where we're not satisfied with saying, I didn't know that, or I don't think that, and I'm not going to do the work to learn. There's a problem there. We just, there's so much opportunity to learn and to grow and to glean, even just by using hashtags and just go through some hashtags. You don't know, learning about racism. I'm sure there's a hashtag about it. Seriously. Am I race? I mean, Googling. Hello, there's just so much out there, and at this point in our lives, it no longer makes me sad. When I hear someone who says something like, I didn't know that, it makes me more curious. Like, who is in your circle, and who are you intentionally allowing to be in your circle, who allows that type of thinking, or who just kind of fans the flame of ignorance. Right. What's your dinner conversations like? Who's at your dining room table? That's what hits me, is the curiosity, not sadness, but who are you eating lunch with? That's where my mind goes. It's a curious type of sensation for me when I hear, it's like, where's the root? Yeah. And where's the tree?
Those are some great questions. I love that. Like, just diving in deeper, that would be some great questions to like ask someone without being accusatory, but just to get them kind of. Mm-hmm. And what is one thing that you want people to know about Black culture, or that it's like your favorite? What's something that you're like, kind of like you said, not all Black people are the same. We're all different, but something that we just kind of, you're like, I love this about Black culture.
Okay, so especially being from Nebraska, I have to share this story. Okay, so I feel like there's certain things, I think, within even certain states that really stand out to me. And I've traveled through, I think it's probably been close to 40 states in the US, at least in the high 30s. And I think that it's so beautiful in Nebraska, specifically, that when I see another Black person, there's this unspoken language and this unspoken knowing that you just do that when you see them. And the thing is, I've been to coffee with a girlfriend of mine who is white, and I've been to, out at a restaurant with a girlfriend of mine who is Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them said, "Did you know her?" Two separate occasions. "Did you know him?" And I said,
no.
Yes and no. And I got to explain that. And I'm like, wow. But there's that knowing. Now, when I went to Atlanta, though, Leah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I was like going like this. Nobody was doing it back. And I don't know, when you have that much Black, presence in a city. I imagine your head would get tired, or or there's this knowing to always speak to your elders within the Black, and you don't have to know them, but when you go into a room with elders, whether it's the day after Christmas morning, go into the bathroom, when you walk into a room with your elders, they could be just 3 years older than you. You better speak and say, "Good morning." You just walk in here, you didn't speak? You can't speak? Oh, I love that. I love that, because it's just, really, I'll go to a bathroom. It doesn't matter where I am. If I see it, it's innate, it's natural, it's in my mind, and it's beautiful. I will always speak to my elders and acknowledge them. "Hello, sir. How are you? Hello, ma'am. Hi. Good afternoon." And that's just that knowing. And it wasn't there wasn't necessarily a handbook that was given and say, "Karissa, whenever it's just that knowing." And you're taught in ways. You're taught without, deliberate scripting or, instruction. You're taught by example. And so in watching, it honestly makes me a little emotional. Like, it's a beautiful piece of my culture that I understand that we are to speak to each other. There's that common bond. And when someone doesn't do the nod back, it's like the greatest offense. Can we go there? Like, did you not see me wave? Especially, there's like 3 of us here. Did you not see me do the nod? You're supposed to do it back. So I just think that's a really cool thing, and I'm grateful to be part of that that code.
I love that. My dad definitely keeps that up, or even just a neighbor likes waving. If his neighbor doesn't wave back in his neighborhood, he gets so offended. It's like, "Okay, Dad, it's okay."
I love it.
And then, Karissa, just getting to know you, we were having some conversation earlier. Not really till recently, in the last couple of years, you discovered that you're on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And being a special education teacher, you're talking about how it didn't really occur to you until someone mentioned it to you. Can you kind of tell me about that moment, like when you realized or when things started clicking for you?
I think I was pacing at that point at her house. An older lady, a loved one of mine, she actually has a daughter that she adopted. She's her granddaughter, and her granddaughter's on the spectrum. And when I was maybe about 10 or so, I started babysitting her. I think it was 10 or 11. I started babysitting that young girl. And maybe it was maybe I was about 12. Anyway, she was diagnosed with autism at an earlier age than obviously when I began to believe and know that I was on the spectrum. But I just started to feel this calling to special education in working with her, and not even fully understanding what autism was, but just knowing that she had different abilities and different ways that she communicated, different strengths. And I myself have been myself for a very long time. You know, I was 33 years old when this woman was observing me. I had gone to her house just to spend some time, get some mothering time because my mom had recently passed. And she was observing, you know, some of my food choices. She was observing, you know, even my rate of speech sometimes, the things that would just come out, and then also some of my stimming, which I later found out. So whether it was the pacing or whether it was the shaking of my legs and jiggling or whether it was the rocking, and not knowing that's what I was doing, you know, no one had really just pointed all of that out before. But she's like, "Oh, Karissa, I think you are autistic." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And so, you know, after taking an informal evaluation, I began to tear up because there were so many things that really resonated with me. And I never fully understood it when I was a special education major in college. When we would talk about mild to moderate disabilities, that was what my focus was initially. I later changed my degree to international community development with 2 concentrations, special education and teaching English as a second language. But when it was being taught, when autism was being taught, it was a little bit too gray for me to really capture and understand, like black and white concrete things. Not don't give me a spectrum. Like what give me the direct, you know, defined details that I can connect with and apply. But I kind of honestly, I didn't really ever plug it in, and it really didn't connect, honestly. But later on, when I talked to her, you know, I'm in my 30s, you know, my nephew had already been diagnosed with autism and he was considered nonverbal. And later on, my niece was diagnosed with autism and she has the speech. And so it's fascinating to, you know, to watch how even within my own family, there's just, it's really vast, the differences. And for me as an educator, surrounded by other educators who, as a substitute teacher, I'm constantly, you know, subbing for special education. And I've been blessed to have friends who are special education educators. And I've been able to speak with them and talk to them. They're like, okay, now I get it. That makes sense. And then a girlfriend of mine was like, look at this video, Girls with Autism on YouTube. I think you're going to see a lot of connections. And so as I watched the video, I began to cry because I'm like, now that makes sense. You know, even the social aspect there, you know, I've been able to mimic and watch and apply things that I watch and see what works and what doesn't work. But unknowingly, you know, I did a lot of that as a child, just trying to fit in, not knowing that perhaps there was that autism link, you know, trying to appear what would be considered as normal, you know. And I don't really think there is an appropriateness to even call something normal, because there's no we're human beings and we're so diverse within ourselves as individuals. Like, what is a norm? But to understand the differences with someone who may be autistic and someone who's not, I think that's fascinating. And so for me as an educator, and peeling back the layers of my childhood, I can see, you know, the different elements of stimming and the different ways that I stood out in what would be considered a positive way because of being what I believe was being autistic. And I think that now, as I went through, you know, counseling, even when I believed that I was considered autistic. As I was going through counseling, even for grief with my mom's passing, my counselor, his son was autistic, and he shared that with me. And he just said, if you get this diagnosis formally, how is that going to change you? And I'm like, it's not. Okay, so what is going to stop? Nothing. What is going to start? Nothing. I'm just going to continue on as I have been, and embrace myself in how God's created me to be, and continue not to try to conform. I think the more in my life that I have tried to conform or watch, like when I was a child, I watched and see what was okay to do. The more that I tried to copy and paste, the more constrained and suffocated I felt. The more I embraced my eyes bucking like that, I didn't even find out that my eyes did that until we really got into, phones, digital, taking pictures and stuff like that. And the first time that I actually saw myself like this was when somebody took a picture of me. I think I was probably in my early 20s, honestly. And I was like, wow, that's why people stand back when they talk to me, because I get like this. And and some people are like, why are you so close? They'll actually say that, like, why are you so close? And it feels right. So when I'm on a Zoom, it makes more sense for me to get here because I can't get close to you, So I feel in my head, it just makes sense. And so I've been on a political forum. It was some really formal thing. And even once I was on an actual network on TV. And it just made sense for me as I was talking to be this close. So in observation, you can sometimes make adjustments to not be sitting on someone's lap virtually. That's a bit much. So, everyone my whole life, I've heard that's just Karissa. When someone new would be added in, they'd be like, what is her deal? They just say that's just Karissa. And it is. It's just me.
It is you.
And I think that's, it's really the truth when I say this, that the more that I have just embraced and celebrated me as I am, the more peace I've had and the more joy I've had. The more I try to conform to whatever I feel will be praised or accepted, I shrunk. I shrunk. And I think it's really important for us not to shrink, even with, people, those who have quiet voices. Even if you have a quiet voice, sometimes you may even feel like you're shrinking when someone says, speak louder. You know what I mean? Yeah. You just have to embrace who you are. And if you have a quiet voice and that's true to who you are, embrace that, celebrate that. If you have a very, broad shoulders and tall, like, don't do nothing to shrink and make yourself smaller. And I think that's a beautiful thing when you can just embrace who you are, who you were created to be, and find gratitude in that.
Yeah. And I think your story is just so powerful, because I think there could be people, women especially, who, like you said, you try to conform. That's known as like masking. Women, their autism goes undiagnosed because they mask. They look at, oh, okay, this is how I fit and this is how I get by. But like you said, then you're not being yourself, and who you are as a person is beautiful. Like, you've accomplished a lot. Like, you're going out traveling. Most people haven't even left Nebraska itself. So the fact that you went to all these countries, you tried and adapted to the language, you did all these things, and that was being yourself. And like you said, it's your own journey. You don't have the formal diagnosis. You're not telling anyone that they shouldn't get it. But for you, like, this is who you are. But it's so interesting that you ended up in, as a career, like, it's like, wow, it's like you're like a reflection of your own career. And like, you could help another family one day. You never know, like, whose light you're going to light up just because of that. And as I was speaking to you earlier, my brother has autism, and he's on the spectrum. He's a higher functioning on the spectrum, as they say, but you are able to express yourself more than he is. So it's like, oh, I get to learn, like, for stemming, like, what that is for you. You're like, that's a release for me. I was like, oh, that's why my brother does that. So just being able to have that connection and help other people, I think it's incredible. And I think, for you, that, you don't look autistic, or when people say things like that, you're like, well, it doesn't all look the same. Like they say, when you've met an autistic individual, you really have just met one, because they're all just like people. Everyone doesn't act the same, right? So it makes sense that if someone has autism, they may have, like you're saying earlier with your kids, you're substituting, all their names really quickly. My brother, if it's about facts about his favorite car is a Lincoln Town Car, so he knows all the facts about it. He can tell you all the details. So having, like, maybe some savant skills where you have, like, just like a little quirk or something that you're just like, I can do that, I can remember that, that's easy for me, and it just adds spice to, like, who you are as a person. So I just think, I don't know, it's beautiful that you can live out in your own truth and not let anybody else define, like, what that looks like, because you're out here traveling, you're out here working, and you're gonna be, I think, inspiration to other young women who, like, maybe find out that they have autism, or they may be unsure, but they're like, oh man, she's out here traveling, she's working, she's talking on a show, like, wait a minute, I can do all those things too, but I can still be myself, and educating others on, yeah, this is what autism looks like, but at the end of the day, you're Karissa. That it's just you.
Right. And I mean, even growing up in my speech, sometimes people on the spectrum can be told they're too direct. Like, why do you have, add a little bit more floral language to what you're saying. Well, that's exactly what it looked like, or that's what it sounded like, so I'm going to speak on it. So now, with heightened level of awareness, I do work to not be offensive, and I'm my name Karissa means grace and love. It comes from the Greek word charis, and in the Choni tribe in Kenya and many African countries as well, it means shepherd. Karissa means shepherd. It's a boy's name. And so I understand that language is very important, and regardless of whether even without the knowledge of being autistic, I watched myself grow as a child into a young woman, and I did notice that sometimes I would be very cut and dry, and then there are times where I realized there is a need for me to be diplomatic in this moment. And I think that having that sensitivity is a blessing as well, because everyone doesn't have that. And I think that, if you have that awareness to use your language very carefully, then so many people get the benefit from that, including yourself. So I'm grateful for that awareness.
And I mean, there's all areas in where we grow, and as a person, you're able to grow in that area, but it's part of who you are. But there are times to be diplomatic, or just you comes on.
And then sometimes it's just gonna tell it as it is.
That's me. You're like, I don't mean to offend, but and I love that, having that self-reflection, be like, this is where I was, and this is where I've come, and we all experience growth in different ways. And so, like, it can be hard with the societal norms, there's always something that someone can nitpick at, but it's great that you are a person who is learning who you are, you're being more confident, you're on your journey on the spectrum, just knowing who you are as a woman. I just love that you're able to just talk about yourself and be so free. I really love your carefree personality. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. And I think that, I even have an appreciation of where I am now, honestly. And it has been a journey. I do remember, and I don't know if this may be a link, but I would make sure that as I made selections and wardrobe choices, I was always very I tended to stray away from patterns because it just, I don't know, it was too much for, I liked solids. And then also I try not to get into fads because in my head, I was thinking in 20 years, I don't want people to make fun of me for what I was wearing in those pictures. That's just how I
Good
was, that's
idea.
honestly, that's how so I was like, I should stick with classic cuts and
Yeah.
patterns because that's how I've been wired all this time,
Mhm.
honestly. As I was just thinking, in 20 years, 30 years, I don't want people laughing at me when they see pictures. Like, who thinks like that? Apparently me. But now I'm getting better, and I shouldn't say getting better. I'm changing, I'm growing,
Yeah.
I'm ever evolving.
Yeah.
I'm not just there's not just one texture of me.
Mm.
It's there's diversity within. So I'm actually embracing patterns. So my sisters will see me wearing a pattern. They're like, Karissa, you're wearing a pattern. I know, and I didn't get scared. It didn't scare me. Wow.
I loved your Instagram, that skirt you're wearing. That was bad, man. I love
Oh,
that.
thank you.
The pattern was
See,
so cute.
thank you. I love that. I love leopard as a pattern, like
Okay.
animal print. I really have an appreciation for that.
Mhm.
I don't venture out a lot outside of like the animal print.
Yeah.
But or unless it's very, very vibrant colors.
Mm.
I don't really do a lot of muted colors. It's gonna be one extreme or another. So
Okay.
either you're gonna get black or you're gonna get lime green. But so I don't know. Yeah, it works. And I put on a gray hat because I didn't want to do my locks for this.
Your hat's cute. I was like, okay,
Thank
I
you.
like that hat.
Thank
Very
you.
much a fashionista. It's okay. In your
Thank
pictures,
you.
in 20 years, they're like, dang, you're doing good. What?
My
'Cause
sister,
everyone
oldest
has like the
sister,
busted up pictures. Like
yeah.
you're like 12. You're like, dang, mom, why'd you let me wear this?
Yeah, my sister Kanisha, I usually run, anything by her when it comes to like a speaking engagement, whether virtually or in person. She helps me figure out what to wear. I do not like shopping. I don't, that's just not my thing.
Mhm.
My sister has been there for me. Has not been my gifting or my desire. But yeah, so thank you.
I gotcha. I love it. And Chris, I want to thank you for your time today. The conversation was amazing. As you saw, I had a smile on my face the whole time. Just really thank you for supporting World Speaks and coming on and telling your story because we appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, it's my honor. It's my honor. Thank you, Leah. Thanks for the opportunity.